let's go around and we'll read the conversation agreements. I'm tweaking these a little bit, but for right now, I think they're still the ones that you guys are used to, and they're not going to be that different. But so I'll start, and then we'll just go. I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but I have me, Dad, and then we'll do LaSonia and Marion. So, okay, confidentiality, maintain the privacy of individuals' thoughts and experiences shared within the circle.
I haven't got that up.
Oh, it's not up for you?
No. I have conversations, how we engage.
Yeah. So, but it doesn't show anything else?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it does show. These are... Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, it changed. Yeah,
it's changing a little bit. So yeah.
Okay, I should read confidentiality then, huh?
So I read confidentiality. You can read listening.
Listening. Okay. Which I wasn't doing because I was.
Case in point.
Pay attention to what's going on. Okay, listening. Listen attentively and respectfully to each person's perspective without interrupting or trying to formulate a response before they're finished speaking.
Okay. And then this one, yeah.
Sharing. Share from your own experiences and feelings using I statements and avoid making generalizations or assumptions about others.
Curiosity. Come with a genuine desire to learn, explore, and understand new things.
And responsibility, take responsibility for your learning and growth and be willing to reflect your own biases, assumptions, and experiences. And then Dad, the last one.
Okay, commitment. Remain committed to the goal of healing, growth, and understanding. Have patience and respect the process of learning and healing together, acknowledging that it may take time.
Any questions or thoughts? Okay, so this is just our basic getting to know each other. I think we do know each other pretty well at this point, but whatever you feel to talk to. So what are your hopes for your family or community? What would your best friend say about who you are? What sense of purpose, mission, duty guides you in your life? Describe an experience where you learned that you had more in common with someone than you initially thought. And in a few sentences, describe your reaction to the reflection question. So you just need to answer one of those. So whoever wants to pop in, go ahead.
I'll pop in.
Yeah.
First of all, I need to leave right at 11:30.
Okay.
But and excuse my voice. Some days it just doesn't work, and today it's not working very well. But I think kind of a combination of, I'd like to address number one, but before I do, I feel like I've turned a corner. It's taken me this long to figure out how I feel about what we're doing. And I'm kind of glad that in one way I'm sad I missed that panel discussion, but in a way it was probably a good thing because I was still not quite ready to participate in that because I didn't know where I was. And doing that, I have said things that I have regretted, that I think we've kind of edited, and other things that I wasn't quite strong enough to be able to explain how I feel. But I'm ready. I feel pretty confident about where I am and ready to share that with others, which is what number one for me is about. I had a talk with my bishop. I've got a message into my stake president. Haven't heard from him yet, but I've been invited to go to a ward council meeting. Let's see, Mark, you may have seen this, the regional meeting that we had on the 5th Sunday in January. I don't know if any of you saw that or listened to it. But there were 4 topics. Our area president is Elder Pearson. He had 4 topics. Topic number 3 was unity. And he was very clear when one of his counselors addressed it, but we will not have racism in our wards and stakes. And he challenged each ward and stake in their ward council and state council meetings to address that and how they were going to deal with it. So I went to my bishop and said, I've been working with this group. If you need my help or input, I have some ideas. So I was going to do that next week, but I'm going to be out of town. So probably the first part of February, I'll be going to that ward council meeting. I'm going to talk about artwork. Even though in our ward, we have one Hispanic person, everybody else is white. And the overall feeling is we don't have a problem. There's nothing we need to do. And I'd like to challenge that. I realize that, yes, there is a lot we need to do. I'm going to talk about artwork and also about discussing history and the hard questions that we've come across. That's big. So that's what I'm doing.
Thank you. That's great. I guess maybe even just to follow up on that, on some of my hopes. I hope really truly that we can actually talk about some of these hard things. I hope that we can learn to do this without it feeling so scary for people. I feel like initially it's scary, but I feel like once you start, it feels normal now. Even though maybe it's just, when I had my first baby, I remember being like, that was really hard. And I was scared because I didn't know what to expect. And my second baby, I was scared because I knew what to expect. And maybe some of that's the same, but at least I know what to expect now. So it's not that there's still not some trepidation or anything, but still just this idea that, this now feels more normalized for me. And it feels doable. And maybe that's what I would say. So I hope that we can bring that more into how we address this, that it at least feels like, oh, we can do this, that this is something we can do. So that would be my hope right now.
Can I add something to what Marion said?
Mm-hmm.
What Marion is doing would never occur to me to do. Because my guess is that it would be threatening to people. Mm-hmm. The ward council is that I'm assuming that without knowing, but I did ask permission on the 11th of February to play. I don't know if I told you about this. This discussion has sparked this to play a piece by George Walker. George Walker is African American. He died in 2018. And he was a composer. He won the Pulitzer Prize for music. And he wrote this beautiful, beautiful string quartet, quiet. It was for his grandmother, kind of dedicated to his grandmother. And I invited Robert to come out and introduce it and dedicate this piece to, what's his name? The pioneer that came out in the early company.
Green Flake.
Yeah, Green Flake.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is nobody in our ward has ever heard of Green Flake. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to dedicate on Black History Month a wonderful piece of music by an African American who recently passed away, and to remember Green Flake and what he gave to the church and all African Americans, that they're part of the cause of Zion. And now is the time to remember that and celebrate it. And a member of the bishopric that I deal with said, can you send me over what you're going to say and what he's going to say and a copy of the music? Mm-hmm. I think he's a little nervous. This is going to be some rock and roll band or something. It's just a string quartet. Though I have had the wild idea of playing. Hello.
Hi.
Carolyn.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah. I have had the idea of having Peter, Paul, and Mary. It's an old spiritual, what they called the Negro spiritual. If I Had My Way. It's a song about Samson. It's a song about how at the end, if I had my way, I would tear this temple down when he's blind and his last act is to kill himself and his enemies. What a dramatic story. And Peter, Paul, and Mary do such a wonderful job. I don't dare propose this for sacrament meeting, no. Though it does say in the church manual that we should respect different forms of music. I don't think they meant Peter, Paul, and Mary. See, Negro spiritual. But it's a wonderful message. It's a message of someone who erred and in the end takes his life to avenge his enemies. It's not the most spiritual message, but it's still very powerful. He asks God to give him strength to tear down a temple, and the enemy's temple. Anyway, that's what I've been going through musically as I'm thinking through this. I don't know that I'd have the courage to ask my bishop to address this in the ward council. I think they would be threatened by it. That's my feeling.
Thanks, Dad.
To follow up with that, Mark, I didn't ask to come to the ward council.
Yeah.
The bishop came up with that idea as
Oh,
a follow-up because Elder Pearson, he kind of opened the door. He said, in your ward councils, you need to talk about racism and how you're going to address it in your wards and states. And when I mentioned this group to my bishop, he said, oh, that's the topic of our next ward council meeting. Each organization is going to give ideas of what they can do. Would you come and tell us your ideas?
I see.
So I was not being brave. He gave me the invitation.
I do think, Dad, the door's been open a bit to actually explore this more than it ever has, especially because it came from the Utah Area Authority. So, yeah.
What's remarkable about this is that a lot of longtime members of the church, especially in Salt Lake, think the best way to solve a problem is to run from it.
Yeah. Don't talk about it.
Don't talk about it. You know, oh, somebody might be offended. Oh, it's embarrassing. No, who was it? I remember somebody saying that the problem, the solution to bad communications is not stop talking. The problem to solve bad communications is more communications. We have the wrong instincts too often. That when we see something sensitive or difficult with anyone that we know, is to sidestep it and say nothing. We want to be polite. We want to be nice. We don't want to, and that's nice. That's a good instinct to be polite and to be nice. But at some point, that buries the truth. It buries the problems. We've got to address them with courage. And I'd like to know, Marion, what your bishop comes up with. Could you let us know what they do with racism?
I will.
Yeah.
I will. And I think one of the things I want to offer is this very thing, Mark, and I've talked about this before. I haven't done anything because I don't know what to do. And I'm confused by the issue. I don't know whether to say African American or Black or people of color. And because I don't know, I don't address it. And I think the first step is talking about how do we have a hard conversation. And as I've talked with some of my neighbors, telling them what I'm doing, they've had the same concerns. We're all concerned without a way to communicate that concern. And I think that's got to be the first step. How do we do that?
It's the fear of silence, isn't it?
Yeah.
Larry's here to listen. And Larry, if you want it anytime you can pop on, just let me know. And Carolyn, we're actually just going through these, getting to know each other questions. And we've talked mostly about what our hopes for the community is, but you can address whatever you want of these questions. So
I was just going
Sonia,
to make,
Carolyn.
I just was, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. You
Yeah.
you can go.
I was just going to make a comment in response to what Mark and Marion are talking about. A friend of mine gave the most beautiful lesson in Relief Society, and I went to her board. And she teaches at Westminster, and she is used to talking about hard things, so that helps. But I think one thing that the Relief Society just opened up about race and LGBTQ issues and in really personal, productive ways. And I've never been in a Relief Society where that has happened. And I think my friend who is teaching, she just was so, she said the words over and over and over again, and was so comfortable with that everybody became very comfortable with talking about hard things. And boy, it was, I wish I could have recorded it, because it was really a model of how that can happen.
What words did she use over and over again?
You know, bisexual, trans, Black, African American. And it was from the talk by the French, and I can't remember how to say, Gerard.
Yes.
And so that opened the doors. And I think that those words need to be normalized in church every single week in every setting. And so that we can get to the point where we can talk about it and do meaningful things, not just saying the words, do meaningful things.
Okay.
Anyway, that doesn't answer any of these questions.
That's okay. We end up going off on tangents anyway. So, I mean, this really actually, I think we are talking about what are our hopes and how are we working through those hopes. Oh, it looks like Stephanie's on. Yay.
I don't know what I did.
You're fine. I'm glad you got on. So we're actually, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say I came through my email that you sent me.
Yeah.
But I couldn't go through Messenger.
It's tricky. I think there's very specific ways that it wants you to do it. So I'm glad you made it.
Yes.
We actually are, so LaSonia, maybe you can speak next to this. We're actually talking, we kind of have our regular questions up, but we kind of got on the topic of what are our hopes for our community. And Marion kind of started this particularly for speaking about race within the church and how do we move forward with this. So that's kind of where we landed. So LaSonia, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I don't know if you guys are going to be ready for my thoughts. It's probably going to dive way down deep, and I apologize. Look, I am going to apologize ahead of time, but I am going to address this number 3 question as to what sense, purpose, and mission and duty. And I have to say that as I have started this journey, I'm going to use a quote first that this mosaic, this speaks for me. This is words. It says, and the one that speaks to my heart right now it says, my job is to ask God to do what only He can do, and then turn that anger into a holy passion, and then point me toward the appropriate tables to flip over. You know, these tables of scarcity, racial biases, and violence. And then I happened to find another one in there that literally talked about Holy Week and flipping the tables. And I just, and as I've started working with these young people, I have, and this marine science and all of that, and that I've been offering to them. And one of them that really has like just hit my heart in so many ways as I'm working with I say BIPOC. So Marion, as you were asking, and BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. So if that's not one that you've heard, that is one that I use, and I try to make sure, because that way I feel like I'm actually including all of them, all of us. And I've asked, like Native Americans, what are their thoughts? And they feel like there are Indigenous and Native American. And so
Spell that, Lasagna. How do you spell that? BIPOCs.
It's just capital B, capital I, capital P, and capital O, and capital C. That's the acronym for it.
And it stands for?
Black, Indigenous, People of Color.
Okay.
So it's like it encompasses. So it's Black people, it's Indigenous, and it's people of color. So kind of covers everybody in that little realm. And so one of the things that I've really gotten into is called maritime archaeology. And I don't know if you've ever heard of that. But basically it has to do with the African Americans and the transatlantic slave trade. And that has been an absolute, honestly, a heart-wrenching deal for me. And even more so why, as I'm working with these young people and finding out so much of what they don't know about their own history. And there was a talk that was given by Elder Bednar, and we just had our conference, and I've listened to state conference, and I felt so disconnected, even though we're supposed to be building in unity. And this is why, and I'm gonna say this, and please, I hope not to offend anybody, but it may. So I'm just disclosing. But in this talk, Elder Bednar talks about the welding link. And I don't know if you guys have read that talk, but in this talk, I'm just going to share just a couple things. Please excuse me. But basically, he talks about the chains of generations. And he goes on to talk about why it is so important that 3 ways, like he talked about 3 generations that he knew behind him and 3 generations ahead of him, and how his heart turned to the fathers. And as I listened to that, I couldn't help but feel, I'm like, well, we can't even afford to say that, because our chains came broken. They were already broken. And so he thought about that as he sat in the temple, and he said, I'm a link of all joining generations, past, future, all that have a mind and a body of tissue and limb and joint and brain, have come as an inheritance from those who were before me, and my posterity have passed through me to them. And I just looked at it and I'm like, that's interesting, because I think about the mission statement of my grandfather. My grandfather is immediately directed to slaves. He said, I can't afford to break. He said he can't afford to break the chain. I said, but how about when your chains have already come broken? Do you see the problem now with Africans? There were no records. In many cases, our people were thrown overboard because their worth was more dead, because they were treated like animals, rather than the fact that they could come in and be sold to the insurance people to collect money. It was easier to throw them overboard. And the diseases, and this is even for the Native Americans in the boarding schools. I said, even with the Holocaust people, even Holocaust Jews, anybody else, even the Native Americans, you could at least say their names. They didn't even collect our names. Our names weren't written. So you couldn't even say Africans or African American. You can't even say their names because they're in the bottom of the ocean. Their names weren't collected. There was no inheritance. It came broken at the bottom of an ocean or tied to a ship. Shackles on hands and feet, bloody, rusted, weakened by global slave trading, the triangular trade. Disease, treated as animals, thrown overboard to a watery grave, lost at sea, eaten by sharks. Why? Covetousness, conspiracy, crime, greed, economics, and accumulation of wealth. Skills taken, a simulation required, never credit given for what was built on the back of slaves. Still today, no restitution, not even to us, given, even like they do to the Native Americans. The atrocities or protections given as to Jews, the list goes on. We still have no voice or seat at the table. Just here in Omaha, they passed the bill, everybody was there, they asked our opinion, and not one of us was even invited to the table. They take our ideals, they claim them as their own. Our posterity cannot afford to break the chains. That's what Elder Bednar said. He said, I wish I had the elegance of language to convey to you young people here today the feelings I had in the temple, the great overwhelming desire that, where does it go? Oh my gosh, it just goes on. So I've like literally highlighted this out. Now, mind you, at the end of this, Elder Bartner did say a very comforting word, which was, it all starts with you. That even as I've listened to some of the people that are telling the stories about our people, as they said, she said, it's not your responsibility. Okay, what happened in the past. It's not your responsibility to tell our stuff. It's not even your responsibility to decide what's important and when you want to put it in a book. It's our responsibility to go and get it, to find it, to do what is necessary. God is waiting and he's opening the doors for us to do the work, for us to decide what is important today and to teach our families what they need to do. Because right now, as I looked at, again, the artwork that showed the waving of the Hosanna flag and all of those people that are waiting to have their work done, all of them waiting, but we don't even have the motivation to even do the missionary work to let people know that there is work to be done. And I just listened in 2023 to them literally say, we don't even know their history. They don't even know that we got history. We could do this. We need to be doing this. We don't know. That is a problem. And that's not something we can wait for you to do. That is something that we need to take upon ourselves and do. Because as Elder Bednar said, the chains are broken. When are we going to become the welding link? Sorry.
Thank you. No, I actually think that's a very powerful example of why we need to hear voices. Larry had his hand raised, so I want to, if he wanted to say something, but LaSonia, that was very powerful. I just wanted you to know that was a very powerful testimony. So thank you. Larry, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I'm just here to observe today, but I did want to, LaSonia, thanks for sharing that, first of all. I think it's important for people to understand the dynamic. And so, first of all, I'm really happy and proud of this group for continuing to meet. It represents a dynamic and a model that can be used in the wards and the stakes, and we hope to do that down in Texas when we have Paul Reeves. I'll be talking about the format that you guys are using. Secondarily, these conversations are important for the very exact reason that LaSonia just mentioned. the terms of BIPOC, how you have conversations in your wards and stakes are important. They need not be scary, or you need not be fearful. The thing is that we as saints have to become friends with folks of different cultures. And I think that's really one of the more important things that I try to communicate in my calling as the African Heritage Outreach Specialist for the church, is that friends, once you have a friend and take the time to move their culture and heritage up your priority list, it becomes easier to have conversations with them about things. With respect to the Unbroken Links, so there is a very large project called the 10 Million Names Project, which actually I'm heading up for the state of Texas, but more importantly, if any of you are members of Black Lives Bless, will be a resource for that. That's a multi-year project that Family Search is involved with, along with the African American Genealogical Association, and American Ancestors. And what it is attempting to do is to link all of the records, the 10 million records of the missing names from the 1870 census going back to the 1600s. So in other words, all of those folks that LaSonia mentioned that have no names, that are sitting in as property in somebody's drawers on the history of a plantation record, we're trying to document. And that becomes important to, and I think LaSonia mentioned it, just because there was slavery and just because there are plantations and just because they may have been in your family, you didn't do it. Nobody said you did it. But it becomes important that you preserve those records. And if you find those records, upload them so families of African heritage can link their families together. There is the sentence that Martin Luther King uses when he talks about the sons of slaves and the sons of former slave owners get together. That happens through family history, right? That happens when we all work together in trying to link our families together so we can get to the water's edge, right? And so don't think because you may not be active and aggressively out working on some dynamic of something that is going on in the secular world currently. What is important is that you have a heart and develop a compassion to accept the information that we are talking about, and we have been talking about, your family's a part of, our history as a church. The dynamic of that discussion should not be lost on anyone. Coming to terms with that, the truth will set you free was the title of what we did, and it's the title of how Paul is coming down here to Texas, is a conversation that I can't tell you the importance of it to releasing the stress of a lot of people about not knowing their history. It's okay not to know your history. What's not okay is not to know your history and to make up things that are contrary to the church's position. Most of the missionaries I talk to haven't read the church's position on the priesthood ban. And so they go out and talk to Black people and have no knowledge about what the church's position is and say something that may or may not be true. 91% of African American men either leave the church or become inactive within 4 years.
Less than that.
And people say to me, well, why is that? Well, there's a variety of reasons, and I think we all know. They don't get information as to things that may be of interest to them just because. I mean, when somebody tells me that, I didn't even know there was a Green Flake movie or a monument 3 years after it occurs, I have to say that it is not my responsibility I don't speak for every Black person. I have to rely on my bishops. I have to rely on my Relief Society and elders quorum presidents. But most importantly, I have to rely on other members to not have the selective neglect of thinking something's not important just because it's not important necessarily to them. It is important to someone else. And so I say that, and I bring up the 10 Million Names Project because LaSonia did bring up how important our ancestry is. People of African heritage can't even take names to the temple, right? So you have folks coming into a church and the temple is of utmost importance, and they get to a certain point and they can't even find names. That becomes frustrating. So the 10 Million Names Project addresses that. And look for more information from me on that. I will make sure that all of you here get information on that you can share with your friends, wards. And this is a personal endeavor. You don't have to bring your wards. You don't have to bring your state presidents or anything. If you feel moved enough to participate, to help link names together on Family Search through the source linker, or show a friend how they can actually add a name from the records that we're putting up there from plantation records. This is all very helpful, and it's all passive and can be done remotely, but I can't tell you how important it is to the overall retention level that we can have to keep people of African heritage in the church and engaged. And so that's all I wanted to say, since LaSonia brought that up. And
I was thinking about that, Larry. I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Let me add, if I never say it again, how much I appreciate Larry. There's a sense of steadiness, the sense of wisdom. It's just by opening his mouth, you're going to hear something useful. And it's not what he says so much as who he is. So thank you, Larry. I learn something every time I hear you talk. And let me throw in another thing. I took the liberty to order some books by a guy from Harvard, Jacob Olupona. I don't know where he's from. He's from Africa, but he writes on African religion. He's written books on it. What's amazed me about this, I'm doing the opposite thing. I'm not trying to go back. I'm jumping way back and trying to come forward. What's so interesting to me is the deep spirituality of the people of Africa.
Yes.
They generally did not write a book of scriptures, but they have fables, they have poems, they have stories, they have rituals. And what's so interesting to me and so surprising is that it's all over the world. In Brazil, in the United States, you have the dances. Well, of course, we have jazz. That's the most obvious example. It's been the great influence of music in the past several hundred years. But I've read some of these parables, and I won't relate them to you, but they're like the parables of Jesus. And I don't know how to connect them today, but the fact is that there's a deep and rich spirituality that came from Africa that hasn't died, that still is in South Carolina or Bahia, Brazil, or wherever, that I'd like to know more about. Again, I keep thinking of Isaiah 2 that talks about the last days. the mountain of the Lord's house would be established to the top of the mountains, and all nations would flow into it, and they would beat their swords into plowshares. In other words, we're here to share the wisdom that we have from the culture that we brought with us.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think of Larry and Sonia. They bring a different slant on the gospel. Sonia, I know, I think about you walking into your ward, and I'm thinking, for me, this is kind of a theoretical idea, you know. Somewhere they're out there, African Americans, I don't see them in my ward. But you can't avoid the issue. You walk in and you're right there. I mean, in a way, I can sense your frustration and your anger, and it's disappointing that you have to feel that way. That this ought to be that grand gathering where we gather together and hammer our swords into plowshares, where we make some food instead of pulling out swords and trying to defend ourselves. Defense is not the issue. The issue here is we're at the top of the mountains, and we gather our genealogy, and we hear the wisdom of the other people who have lived lives that have not always been easy. I'm grateful for those lives. I wouldn't want to live them, the life of persecution, the life of neglect, but I'm learning from them. So nothing's wasted in this life. Even the examples where, you know, LaSonia's daughters, the little girls will touch their hair or walk away and run from them. There's something to be gained from that, as sad as it is, as tragic as it is. You have to take a lesson from that and walk forward. And that's what I'm learning here, is that I'm gaining new wisdom because this gathering involves people that I don't know, that I've never met before. And again, I'm rambling on, but I just want to thank both, and I'm sure Stephanie has more too. I haven't heard her story so well, but Larry and Sonia in particular have brought me in particular a breadth and a vision and a wisdom that has enriched my life.
Stephanie, do you have anything to add to the conversation or any of the questions? Thank you all for what you have said so far. It's been great.
So my mission, and I always think that you should start the conversation with something they can relate to. And my mission is to spotlight people, Black people of the church. Okay. I have a member, she wants to do she wants to do a Black History moment. And the bishop is like, I don't know. I said, your approach should be, you want to spotlight Black pioneer LDS.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I'm going with it. And also, my church, my ward, is a ward full of med students and other college-bound people. And I want to really drill into them what it means to be inclusive, and that they are in a spot here in St. Louis in our ward to where they can learn to communicate with each other. We've had a Chinese bishop, we've had an African bishop. You know, we have many cultures in our ward. We had Bosnian, and who was the Bosnian? What's the other one? They had a war together. Anyway, we have a lot of multicultural people coming through. Spain, Brazil, what have you. And it's just like, you guys are the ground warriors, you know? And that's what I want to drill. So I couldn't go to the ward or to church sacrament this past Sunday because my new knees could not take the 17 below weather. Okay. It is still a wind chill of a negative 14 out there. I ain't been out in days, but I canceled that appointment, and I am going to speak to the bishop about talking about Elijah Abel, and I've been doing some of my research to get the facts, you know. But also, I wanted to talk to him about Paul Reeves coming, you know. Those are my hopes, followed by the Brigham Young, okay? And so I figured if I start out with Brigham Young right away, it's this like prophet bashing. That's not what I want to do.
Right.
I want to teach them about the history first and then move on, you know. So
Yeah.
that's where I am. And it's spotlighting Mormon pioneers, Black pioneers is what I want to do, because it's just like, okay, well, they believe in Christ and the church is true, you know, and they might stop for a minute to hear something, you know.
I agree with you, Stephanie. Sorry, were you finished?
Oh, yes.
If you want to respond, and then we'll move to the
I was just
topic.
gonna
I'm like,
say-
this was a great conversation in and of itself.
Yeah, I was going to say, just like Stephanie was talking about spotlighting Elijah Abel, that's my thing with, Green Flick, because I didn't know about him. And to live here in Omaha, and I've always had this thing for Jane Manning James, because for one, she was the person that learning about her is how I came back into the church when I fell away. And every time I go to the temple, she's there. She's front and center for me to see every time. And I literally feel like I have this conversation with her spirit as I'm walking down there, like, okay, Jane, I'm coming. We're going to bring them on here. And then, and then Green Flake in it, because it's really sad when you feel like you got these really important pioneers in your own backyard and nobody knows about them but you. And then especially when they played such a huge role in our history. I mean, it's like I think about all the time, Green Flake. I'm like, heck, he's the one that helped get to Salt Lake and all that. And nobody even knows that. It's like these are people that had huge things in our history, and it's just neglected. And then, like I said, even for Brigham Young, there's the big old Florence Mill that's here. Like, that was a part of your history. And there is a non-LDS person that brought that back. Like, it just makes me sad when I think about what's considered priority or what's considered valuable and what's not considered a value, and that's just difficult. And then when I meet new members that come in, that honestly, I feel bad that a new member, he happened to be Hispanic, and he knocked on my window and I didn't recognize him because I sit in a spot and he must sit way in the back, but he recognized me. And I wouldn't even let my window down. Okay, so I'm being guilty here at first because I'm like, who are you? And I'm like, why are you standing at my window? And he goes, church. And I'm going, oh, wow. Okay, I feel really, really bad because I didn't recognize him. But then when he tells me, he's been a member for 10 months and he's been to church once or twice because he sees the members as hypocrites. And I'm like, that bothers me so bad. So, yeah.
I want to add something more recent and healing. So I don't know if Rachel will mind if I tell this. Rachel had a meeting with Lynn Jackson, a friend of ours who is the executive director of the Dred Scott being the same person that Supreme Court had the most unfortunate decision on. In any event, to make a long story short, they had a great meeting, and on the way back, she stopped along with Dana King at the Dred Scott Monument. And I took a photo of that. The descendant of Brigham Young at the monument of Dred Scott. That speaks volumes of where we're trying to move to. If anyone would have told me that would have happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I've only been a member of the church for 14 years, so I don't have that history of going back that much further, but I would have probably chuckled. But yet here we are. Here we are with a descendant of Brigham Young standing at the Dred Scott Monument. And the two issues are weaved together in our history, right? In Missouri. It was a beautiful photograph. I'll send it to Rachel and she can share it with you. But I just say that the spirit, there's a metamorphosis going on within the church. And if we allow it to direct our own spirits, we will be led to where we need to be. And that's all I wanted to say. That was a really beautiful moment. And it's one that is very, very recent. And I think exposes exactly where we're trying to head and where the Spirit wants us to go.
Thank you. That I'm just thinking about that, and then we'll move on real quick. That may be a good conversation to have, even just showing some of that and digesting some of the histories, because there's some interesting, I think, interconnections between it was the same time period. So for me, that was it made me think quite a bit about our history and what was going on at that time. So, well, I feel like we've had a lovely discussion so far. Maybe we'll see how much we get through this. I actually feel like it's very interconnected because we talked a lot about talking to our community about race. This particular, I wanted to bring in Martin Luther King and how we talk to our families about both him and other historic figures, and I think can very much weave into what we have already discussed. So we'll kind of see where it goes, and I think that was a good introduction. I'll go ahead and read this paragraph, and then we'll delve into the questions. We'll see where we go with it. It says, I actually got this from a webpage, just so you guys know. So this was somebody else's experience. I plugged my phone into the car, searched for the I Have a Dream speech, pressed play. Then I waited. My boys were deep in Lego imaginary play, which continued for quite a few minutes into his speech. Then the back seat became quiet. There's something about Dr. King's voice that draws us. My 5.5-year-old noticed his black face in the old broken black and white video, playing his speech loud and clear in our car. For that moment, I knew something was driving into them. Then the questions began firing at me. Why is he talking about black people getting hurt? Why did white people kill black people, Mom? Why couldn't black people hold white people's hands? They have black faces, but their insides are the same, right, Mom? By this time, my eyes teared up. Yes, most of us look different on the outside, but our insides are the same. We have hearts that love and lungs that breathe. We have brains that think. Well, then why? Why? Just because they have black faces, did they not get the same things white-faced people got? Good question, my sweet darling. I did the best I could to answer his questions. I wanted both my sons, my 4-year-old sat attentively listening and processing, to continue pondering these ideas and these circumstances. I want to keep the conversation going. So these questions are really focused on Martin Luther King, but also how do we converse about these things within our families. And I think some of us have young children, some don't. And I don't think it matters. So whatever you consider your family to be right now, please keep that in mind. Or anybody within your life that you now kind of would bring within that space. So I think because our time is short, let's go ahead and do the first 2 questions. I'll just read those and we can kind of talk about those, and then we'll do the next 3. I think, as always, these conversations tend to weave around, and that's okay. So if you even see a question that isn't quite on here that you want to talk about, feel free. This is not I feel like we're in a space right now with each other that we're capable of doing this. So I'll just read the first 2 questions, though, just to kind of contemplate. How has the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. influenced the way your family or community discusses and understands racial equality, justice, and civil rights? considering the impact of historical figures like Martin Luther King Jr., how do you incorporate his teachings and values into conversations with your family or community about the ongoing struggle for racial equality?
I would like to start this one. For me right now, number 2 is a question I would ask or answer. And I know the greatness of Martin Luther King, and he has played a huge influence in my life. But someone that I've just discovered that I didn't really know, but realizing how impactful he has been to me is a person, his name is Robert Smalls. And he is not someone that I hear a lot about until I started in this world of aquaculture and realized the contributions that this man made and the freedom him and his family and some other people took on the oceans, and or not the oceans, but during the time of civil rights, and or just not civil rights, but like way back, stealing a ship, and the things that he did, and I didn't know about him. And so when I found out about him, I've been able to use this as a leverage for teaching these young people. This is how I've gotten in the door. I introduced them to this gentleman, and it's now opened the doors that I can share stories about the brother of Jared. I can tie in these stories and get their attention. And so I just have to say, for me, that has been another shoulder, I guess, because these are all shoulders I feel like we stand on. And so this has been a new shoulder that I have found to buoy me up, as well as to use as a tool within my community of introduction. And was really amazed at what those kids got out of knowing about him.
Thank you. Robert Smalls, is that what you said?
Robert Small is the name.
Yes, his name is Robert Smalls. And he actually has a huge history within, he was just, you have to read about him, because I won't spoil it for you, but it's such an awesome story. And they're actually trying to make a movie about him now.
Any other thoughts? I can say, as I have tried to actually figure out how I wanted to talk about Martin Luther King within my family, particularly on Martin Luther King Day. I have, in all honesty, I have the basic knowledge that we get in school. I have started to read more from him because I have gained more of an interest to do so, and have been amazed at his voice as I have done so. But I still feel like I have a very basic knowledge, which isn't much when you think about what we're taught in school. So I have been trying to pull from just basic knowledge plus what I've started to read more about. And one thing I've really aligned myself with, well, there's a couple things, but one of them is the concept of the beloved community. And to me, it's very similar to Zion, but the one thing I feel like I have see within the beloved community, which I feel like we don't talk about as much, is this push for justice. The need that our desire to belong to a beloved community, our desire to be united, is going to push us to do good and to rectify that which is wrong. And for me, that brought in a whole other concept. So that's been an important thing as I talk about, with my family, or how I want to move forward myself, that I feel like Martin Luther King has added to my understanding, even of my desire to build Zion or to gather in those concepts, that it has brought that into it in a way that I feel is very helpful and useful for me to use. And then really just trying to find ways, I guess I'm curious how other people do this, just trying to find ways to honor both him. I have found this story that this lady tells, that actually when I show things or talk about things, my children who are young also, and her kids were 4 and 5, which was pretty interesting to me that these children at that age were asking those questions. But I have found with my younger ones, who quite frankly get a lot more of my better me now, because I've learned. My older ones didn't get quite as much, but my younger ones get a lot of this, and they are very comfortable now talking about these things and asking those kinds of questions, and pointing out even when they see things in movies where they're like, look, they did it, talking about race. And so I like that idea that she wants to keep that familiarity open enough to be able to have those conversations even within her own family. And my own children are fairly comfortable. My younger ones, well, my older ones are getting more comfortable too, because we talk about it more. But my, little kids, they'll just spit things out. They don't care.
No
So,
pressure.
it's really helpful, actually, in some ways, to have a little child in the home who will just say it like it is, or ask whatever is on their mind. They don't think about it. So, so I appreciate being able to have them pick up on things like that and ask questions about it, because they're things that I don't think everybody would. So that's where I'm at right now with that.
I think also it's important to be aware of our own integral part of that history. So most people aren't aware that President Nelson received an award from the King Foundation for peace. And his photograph, his portrait, sits in the halls of Morehouse College, the only non-Black person in that hall. And his outreach and everything from the B1 celebration to what he talks about in the gathering is built on literally what Dr. King was talking about. And Dr. King is built on one of our ancestors, pioneers, Walker Lewis, who Brigham Young mentioned in a speech, in a talk, and referred to as being one of the good Black members, the good Black elders. Walker Lewis was an abolitionist who actually headed up the Underground Railroad in Boston, the last link before people got to Canada. He also published a book, was responsible for publishing a book. Basically the book talked about the responsibility of white Christians and Christianity as a whole to bring in all people, not just white people as it was being designed back in the 1700s, 1800s. And third, his family's case, is the precursor for what Dred Scott tried to use in law to be considered a citizen. So you can read about Q. Walker Lewis at the Century of Black Mormon site that Paul oversees, and just go read about that. And then there's so much more to that history. It's probably the most consequential unknown African American in the church that affected the community as a whole. And when I say community as a whole, I mean the United States as a whole, that folks like Martin Luther King, W.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, they all really built upon the things that Q. Walker Lewis had done. So, for example, he started the Massachusetts Association of Colored People, which was the basis of the NAACP starting. So we have that history inside the church that we're not aware of. And I will be in April giving a talk on Q. Walker Lewis, should anyone be interested to attend that. And I think it would be beneficial for folks to at least look at that, because like Stephanie said, one of the things that is overlooked sometimes is how rich our own history is. If we just stop and take a look and discern what's going on. And if we can start there, we can certainly move out, because some of our historic pioneers are not just pioneers in the church, they're pioneers in American history.
Where are you giving the speech, Larry?
Yeah, I think that's what people wanted to know.
And is it Zoom?
It will be available on Zoom, and hopefully it'll be sometime in April. I am not sure of the date yet.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Be
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I just wrote this, but it's so funny, between Stephanie, Larry, and I on here, we have introduced 3 different people, because I know Larry talks a lot about QW Lewis. I speak a lot about Green Flake, and Stephanie speaks a lot about Elijah Abel. There's 3 right there that we just started, and I didn't even know what you just shared, Larry, about his connection to Martin Luther King. That's pretty amazing.
That is cool. Yeah.
Lasagna, tell me about Robert Smalls. Was he a member of the church?
I don't think he was a member of the church, but he actually was huge with Abraham Lincoln because of what he did. So no, he was not a member of the church. He just happens to be huge in regards to water. And that's been seems to be my connection. And that was how I discovered all about him. But he has a lot to do with education and things like that out on the East Coast. So, yeah, his story is pretty amazing, honestly. And of course, my other connection with, and these are probably the non-members, is George Washington Carver, just because of the faith person that he was in the field that he was in. So, it's just I think it's where we find our connections at, and like you said, the Lord inspires each of us in different ways, in different places, and he uses what we have to offer, I think to expand upon all these things.
And Robert Smalls was African American, I presume, right?
Oh, yes. And the beauty of his humanitarian story is that even though he was a slave, and when he got money, he went back and bought the plantation house that he was born in, or raised in, and then the mistress of the house, when she had Alzheimer's, he brought her back and even put her in the same room. So like Larry was saying, and everybody is saying, yes, we have this history, but we can uplift, and we can, this isn't about being angry, but it's definitely about telling the stories. People need to know the stories, because as they said recently, it's like a root without, it's like a tree without its roots. We need our roots. Our kids need our roots. They need the roots, not so we can retaliate, but just so we can know who we are and identify.
Yeah, I feel like, gosh, we've had a lot of great stories. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I was going to say that's true, because it seems like we're backsliding on what we can contribute.
Yes.
And we need to know that we are a smart and powerful people. I did a family history in Starksville, Mississippi. My great-great-grandfather was one of the representative to the state. And there's this poster, and literally 50% of them were Black. And I told my nephew, I said, you see this? Obama is president, but we were sitting in the Senate, in the seats. I go, you can be anything. Don't let anybody tell you not. We've had a lot of people of color achieve great things.
And the delegate,
and our country will not continue unless all of us contribute to the land.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were delegates we played some really important roles. You're right, Stephanie. It's and it's just sad because our kids don't our kid. I'm sorry, I focus on the kids because it just makes me sad because their families don't know, they're not passing the information, and these kids are out here, as they say, with no heart and soul. A lot of them killing each other, killing our own people, and it's like we've lost that sense of humanity, and we need that back. And I think these stories are what they need to hear, of that resilience and that pushing, because it took our people to even be where they were, to the resilience that they had to keep persevering in spite of everything. They kept moving. It's like, this is where they were, but this is where they went. Our kids need to hear that.
Thank you. Mary and Carolyn, Dad, any thoughts about how we can incorporate this within our family or community?
I look at this, having worked in business for many years, I look at this as a simple business problem. When you have human resources, when you have people in an organization, what you need to do is make sure that you let them blossom, you let them bloom. If you hold people down, any person is not part of the task of growing the organization. You're not only hurting the individual, you're hurting the organization. You need to let people flourish. And that means listening to people. And I think of, for example, the Toyota way. The Japanese are really good at this. They want everybody in the organization to contribute. If you're an engineer and you go to work for Toyota, you have to talk to clients for 6 months before you can do any engineering. You have to hear the problems, right? And if you're a janitor, you have to give solutions. We have problems here on the assembly line. What's your solution to this? They bring out the best of everyone. So to not do this is to simply destroy the strength of the church. We need to bring out, as a nation, we need to open up so that the talent that Stephanie talks about can rise. It's there. The wisdom, the talent. We need to listen. We need to open up opportunities for people to speak and to act in ways that we can all benefit from. So I see this as a business problem. It's a personal problem. It's more than a business problem, but it's a business problem. What are we trying to do? And what is the goal? What is the goal that we as a church and we as a nation want to accomplish? We've got to marshal all the resources, and that means not let the obstacle of racism stop us from accomplishing what we can accomplish. So we're all better off. We're all better off as every organization if it honors the talent and the skill and the wisdom and the experience, however different it may be, that enriches us all. As John Donne said, he was very sick. He thought he was going to die in the 17th century, the great poet. And he heard a bell ring, and they ring the bell when someone dies. So he thought, am I so sick that they've rung the bell that I'm going to be the one that dies today? No, it wasn't him, but it was the person next door that had died. And he wrote those famous words, ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Every man's death matters to me because I am part of mankind. If a clod be washed away from Europe, Europe is the less. Ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. So this is our problem. It's not just the problem of African Americans. We're in this together. And if we want to accomplish what we need to as a church and as a nation, we've got to honor the what Stephanie tells us. That is, we all have something to add. And if we don't think so, we're really hurting all of us. I am hurt because of the discrimination of Blacks. I can't benefit from their wisdom and their strengths. And so that's on all of us. The bell rings for all of us if it rings for the Blacks.
Thank you. Marian and Carolyn?
I think that's my thought, kind of piggyback on what Mark's saying. I thought of the quote from Joseph Smith, the truth is wherever we find it. I think I'm sadly lacking in truth from my Black brothers and sisters. If I hope to become more like the Savior, more like God, I need my Black brothers and sisters to help me with that. I have no experience with them. They've got a piece of truth that I don't have. I need that.
Carolyn.
Oh, I just so appreciative of learning from everybody today, and I have a list of people I'm going to look up and learn more about. And just real quickly, every year I try to read the letter from Birmingham jail, which I just really love, and it kind of motivated me to talk to my bishop, because it talks about how Martin Luther King Jr. was not getting support from the churches in his fight for justice. And I just want that from our church, to have all the things happen that everybody is talking about today, get that support.
Great. Thank you. Well, I think we'll just move on to the reflection part, rather than, I feel like we answered a lot of those questions. I feel like we do that often. I usually don't have to finish the questions as we go through our discussions. But in this part, feel free, any thoughts that came up for you also during those discussions, if you wanted to add on to something, feel free to do so. But I'll just read this and then we can go around again. What was shared today that resonated with you and why? As you listened to everyone's experiences today, did you notice any common themes or shared emotions? Based on the stories and perspectives shared, what concrete next steps can we work on individually and or together?
I'll just make mine really short and sweet. I have to say, Miriam, you just what you share, what you say about what you don't know, and just the transformation in what it just blows me, and I just want to say thank you. I love to hear what you say, and I just have the greatest respect for your words. Just inspire me.
Thank you.
I have to second that. Miriam, I'm very happy to see you here today.
Thank you.
Second of all, it resonates with me that all three of you, Carolyn, Mark, and yourself, remain engaged in the efforts, because it's just not the words of Martin Luther King. It's the action that is taken after the day. Martin Luther King Day is not just the day, it's 365-day effort at building our relationship to become more Christ-like. He was a humanitarian, even more than he was a civil rights leader. So the efforts to bring human dignity and reconciliation to all is our efforts in growing and gathering Israel together, and that can only happen with respect and understanding. So I'm grateful for all of you being here and continuing that effort, and that resonates with me.
Larry, let me follow up on this. As you're speaking, I'm reminded of the words that have impacted me most from Martin Luther King. Don't know that much about him, but the words that always resonate in my mind are really profound for me. We live in a world where we can't do much. There are children starving in Gaza. There are people being killed and children kidnapped from, by the Russians. What can I do about the great tragedies of life? And you look at racism, it seems so overwhelming. To me, I'm just too sensitive. But I'm reminded Martin Luther King, every once in a while, his words come to my mind. What is it? I can't quote them. But keep moving forward. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But by all means, keep moving forward. What I'm reminded by that is I can do something small. I can do something. And this, I'm really grateful for Rachel, because this, more than anything else, fosters in me a sense of hope that I can do something in this world, despite the great darkness that we see in the world, that there is something, and who knows what goodness may come out of it. So this is really a blessing for me to see life as a place of possibility and hope. That's what this means to me, and what Martin Luther King means to me.
Thank you.
I'll piggyback on that as well. It almost seems overwhelming talking about the big issues. I get that, I hear it. And it wrenches my heart to hear Lasagna talk about her people and what they've been through. I can't fix that. I can't change that. But I can start right where I am. And what you all have done for me today is add to my list for my board council. I'm so excited. I can't wait, because I could have thought about artwork and talking about hard issues, but I can talk about Black History Month. Can we have a speaker? Can we have a special musical number? Can we use hard words? I can use BIPOC and teach them about that. I can talk about Isaiah and the top of the mountains, and we're here. We need to plow or beat our swords into plowshares, and what that means and how we can do it, and the welding link and the 10 million names. I'm just so excited. I've got a long list. I'm going to take the whole word council time.
They might let you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you all. Your perspectives are so helpful. And I feel like I've been armed now with something that I can do for a huge problem in my little corner of the world. Thanks.
I think even just to piggyback off of that, Marion, I think every time we've done these things, I come away with a list. Here's my list now of people I'm going to look up.
Yeah.
But even to say, like, so you can take that to, you know, your ward council. I can teach my kids. I can, you know, find books and resources to have in my home, things that I wouldn't have known otherwise, with voices that I can say, oh, I know who that person is, and we've talked about this, and I have a little bit more background and ability to speak to this than I just wouldn't have had that otherwise. But even thinking about the idea that I can share some of these things with, you know, my stake president and, you know, those kinds of things. I love a list of Black pioneers right now that I can bring to the table and say, these are our Black pioneers, and this is what they brought to our church. Like, that's just a wonderful thought to me. So grateful to have that. I do feel like I now have kind of a good resources that I can bring to my community and my family. So I so appreciate that. And not even just so, you know, you go to school and you sit and you listen to somebody lecture about it. There's no connection there. You know, there's just not a connection in that kind of format. But this one allows a little bit more of a connection card. So I can say, oh yeah, Stephanie totally knows this. And I can speak a little bit to this because I heard her talk about it and we talked about this together and it pulled together for us and we were able to do this. It's just different. It's a different way of learning, even much more personal, and that connectivity there that actually probably will make me remember it more. If I'm able to connect with somebody, I'm going to remember it much more deeply. So I pull that away, and really just with a ton of resources. Got a list. So thank you all. I think Stephanie and Carolyn, I think you two, we haven't heard from yet.
Ditto to everything. Especially with the list of Black pioneers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it gives me more to think about. Elijah Abel and Jane Manning James are the only two that I really know about or talked about. So it's good to know where I can go. What was that Larry, you were talking about where it's a historical account of Black pioneers. What was that book?
It's a website, Century. Just type in Century of Black Mormons, and it
Century.
will take you to the database that's housed at the University of Utah Marriott School.
Okay. Yeah. So I come away with a lot of things too that I can research and somehow pass this on. So luckily, I do have the support of the stake president, but I haven't been able to do much because of my knee replacement. So I'm starting to hit the ground and running again. So.
I just am recovering from replacements too, Stephanie. So anyway,
one day it'll be nothing, but right now it's something.
Thank you, everyone. I don't really have anything to add. Just really appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Again, I feel like we gained so much from this. This is a survey that some of you responded to last time, but if those who want to or can, it's just to help me get an idea of if I'm doing what I want this to do. If you've already filled it out, you can fill it out again if you want. If you have different answers, that's fine. But if not, you don't have to, but that's the link. So I appreciate you all coming and appreciate the time that you guys take out of your lives to be here and help us learn and grow together. Next week, it'll be on Tuesday again. This month, it's mostly Tuesdays, and it's going to be on cultivating empathy and understanding in families. The other one I want to mention is the 30th of January. That's going to be in the evening at 6, and it's what I'm terming a day of lamentation. I want to try and do these quarterly as a way for us to lament together. I really recognize the need for us to express sorrow for pains. I mean, obviously in this group, it can be surrounding racial difficulties and pain that we may feel, but it really could be anything in reality. I think it is helpful. I love the concept of lament, and it's a part of our biblical heritage, actually. So I thought I might try that and would be curious how people responded to that. So just to invite you all to that too, if you can make it. And then we'll just see you guys next week if you're able to make it. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Rachel.
Thank you.
Oh, real quick, I have this
Thank you.
recorded. I mentioned it at the beginning, but people came in. I will send out a link so people can look at it and tell me to edit if they would like. I wanted this one recorded specifically because it was Martin Luther King Day, but we're also moving into Black History Month. So I thought, and I do think it did this, we've got some great discussion about Black history here and ideas. So I wanted other people to be able to hear that. But again, I'll send you the link. You can say yay or nay, and please cut this if you want me to. So yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Uh-huh.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.